Can Australia win the Space X Hyperloop challenge?
And with smartphone batteries failing, what exactly are your rights?
Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Alcatel.
Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Alex Kidman, and I'm joined by a man who knows that the dice are loaded, Adam Turner. We're also joined by a very special guest, Zac McClelland, who's the project leader for RMIT's VicHyper team, which is a finalist in the Space X Hyperloop challenge. Zac, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
Adam, what's new in tech?
While Facebook claims that it's difficult to crack down on fake news, the social media giant has reportedly invested plenty of time and effort to developing censorship tools in an effort to crack down on real news in countries where the rulers would rather keep some news quiet. The New York Times reports that Facebook has developed tools to allow third parties to monitor popular stories and topics, as well as have, quote, full control to decide whether those posts should be up in users' feeds, which is a handy feature which should appeal to dictatorships everywhere.
Telstra is getting ready for the death of 2G on the 1st of December, but it's also gearing up to kill off its 3G network too. You don't need to panic right away, however, as the telco doesn't intend to start shutting down to 3G until at least 2020.
Almost half the world's population is online, according to the latest stats from the United Nations International Telecommunications Union. 47% of people in the world use the internet, up from 43% last year, but usage is still concentrated in the West. Figures dropped to less than 25% of people for most of Africa, along with parts of the Middle East and Southeast Asia.
Amazon's done a Clayton's launch of Amazon Prime Down Under, which is to say it hasn't launched Amazon Prime Down Under at all. Confused? So are we. In essence, while it's not offering the full Prime Perks package Down Under, just in time for its Top Gear but not in name spin-off, the Grand Tour, Aussies can sign up for Amazon Prime through the US or UK to view the show. There's still no sign of an actual Amazon launch in Australia, but we're watching and waiting.
So, Alex, Prime is like the Schrodinger's cat. It's kind of here, but it's not here. What's the story?
Yeah, so Amazon Prime, for those who are not aware, is Amazon's premium service that it offers in the US and the UK and a few other markets, where you pay them a set fee per year. And the big perk for this is actually expedited overnight shipping. And if you buy a lot of stuff from Amazon, the fee they charge you per year, which is around $80 to $100 depending on your local currency, is excellent value. You really only have to ship a few things overnight to well and truly cover that cost. Of course, from Amazon's side of thing, it keeps you in the Amazon cloud, and there's all sorts of stats that suggest that people who have Amazon Prime subscriptions never go anywhere else to shop, so it's good for them. But along with the shipping, you also get music, you get books, and you get video. They have video streaming rights for a bunch of series, and just like Netflix, they have also commissioned original series, and the big jewel in their crown at the moment is the Grand Tour, which is what the ex-hosts of the Top Gear went on to do after Jeremy Clarkson got a bit too punchy, and the BBC ultimately had to let him go. I mean, I really don't think they had a choice there. He didn't give them a choice. That was his action and his choice. That being said, there was all this speculation about who was going to pick up the rights for that show in Australia, and it really, really wasn't clear. There were suggestions that Stan might have been going for the rights, and maybe they were and maybe they won't. But what actually ended up happening was Amazon rather quietly said, well, actually, we've got the global streaming rights to this, and they'd already announced, look, we will show it everywhere from December. They had
which is not much good when it starts in November.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But instead, what they did, at least for Australians, was they said, look, if you've got an Australian credit card, you can sign up for Prime in the UK or Prime in the US. And because we've got the global streaming rights to this stuff, yeah, you can watch that. They don't geo-block the Grand Tour and a small percentage of their other programs, because there is some stuff that they've licensed here, and there's plenty of stuff for which they have the licenses in the UK or the US, but other people hold those rights. So whilst you can see a full Amazon Prime listing if you sign up for a UK or US account, an awful lot of it, you click on it and it says, no, I can't actually play this. They now have a specialised section, viewing while you're abroad, which is headlined by the Grand Tour.
But the weird thing is that when you say to Amazon, so you've launched in Australia, they say, no, we haven't. And then you say, so what actually changed? Oh, we don't want to talk about that. Go away. It's very annoying that they just want to. It's almost like a Netflix will just look the other way and let you in. And I'm guessing it's primarily to fight piracy, because they knew if you couldn't watch the first couple of episodes, you were going to steal it. And once you got in the habit of stealing it, why would you start paying for it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly that. And there was a lot of speculation, oh, look, this is their soft launch, this is how they're getting into it, this is how they're starting it. And they actually went to the step of putting out a statement to say, no, we haven't launched, people are accessing it from the US or the UK, but they didn't say, oh, but we forbid this, because they don't.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I said, so what's changed? Why are you now letting people do that? And they copied and pasted the same reply back to me, which is always fun.
Classic corporate comms, really. But I mean, I guess the thing here, of course, that you've got to weigh up is whether or not it's worth it, because what you're paying for is a service that in most cases you're not going to be able to use. I suppose if you have friends or relatives in the UK or in the US, you could conceivably get a whole bunch of stuff shipped to them, or if they wanted those benefits of Amazon Prime, you could buy stuff for them and it would all get shipped out, because Amazon doesn't care as long as it has a customer. You don't get that expedited shipping, you don't get the music, you don't get all the other extras. What you get is a much smaller catalogue of programming for a fixed monthly or yearly fee.
I'm also assuming that once they launch here, they'll launch some of their extra hardware. Like they have the Fire TV players in the US, which is like an Apple TV sort of set-top box. They have a little Chromecast style Fire Stick, I think, but they won't ship any of that to Australia. I'm assuming once they officially launch in December, we'll get that. Plus, you'll also be able to download the apps for the PlayStation and the Xbox. Unfortunately, there's no app for the Apple TV because obviously they want you to buy their own box. But at that point, it becomes a bit more attractive. What about the Apple TV?
No, sorry. I wouldn't be so sure about them launching the hardware here. I don't
really?
See them making that. Yeah, I don't see them making that play at all, because the hardware, again, it's another tie into the Amazon ecosystem, and it works best when they can deliver you a whole suite of content. They can't do that in Australia, or they can't do it yet, because they don't own those rights. They don't own all those rights. They would launch and they would have this meager little catalogue, and they'd say, oh, and please give us another $80 to $100, or however much the conversion rate comes out for our set-top box to do it. At the moment, and I have tested this and this does work, if you have another device that can do AirPlay, so for example, if you've got a MacBook, you can run the Grand Tour and you can quite happily AirPlay it out to an existing Apple TV model. There's no specific Apple TV app, that's true, and whether or not that gets developed is a kind of an interesting one, because that discussion between Amazon and Apple is always a little bit of a fraught one, as it has been with Kindle over the years. I would presume once they formally do whatever it is that they're doing to go global in December, that they will make their smartphone and tablet apps available more widely. At the moment, if you want those, you've got to jump into
and
the
console
US or
apps.
UK stores. Although, again, you do that, and once you've jumped that hurdle, you don't have to then VPN to access their globally available content. You do if you want to access the entire catalogue, of course, and then you're still playing the VPN cat and mouse game as you are with Netflix or any other provider.
So, Zach, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Can you tell us what Hyperloop is? I think it's basically like a bullet train that can travel at the speed of sound.
Yeah, but we don't really like to call it a train, because that's what we call obsolete technology. We want new and sustainable transportation. So the Hyperloop is a elevated tube network that we hold at a partial pressure, and we levitate a pod and send it down there at the speed of sound.
Okay, there are a lot of really cool things in there. Let's break that down. Firstly, you said you levitate a pod. What's the story there?
So with this competition that we're in, it's to see the technology that we want to use in this Hyperloop, and there's two predominant levitation technologies that we're really trying to test out, and they are mainly magnetic levitation or a air bearing, and an air bearing is just like a cushion of air, like a hovercraft, but just a little bit better.
And so just to explain your part in this, you're with the VicHyper team from RMIT, and you're not building the whole Hyperloop technology. You've gone in a worldwide competition to develop the pod that will travel along the track, yes?
Yes, that's correct. So this competition, there was originally 1,700 entries, and it's now dwindled down to the last 30 that are actually building their scale model. And due to us winning this Breaking Technical Excellence Award over in Texas, we are we are just mainly focusing on the braking side, and so we're building a whole pod to test all that.
And where are you going to test it?
So we're taking it to Los Angeles in January, and it's pretty cool. We get to test it at the front of Space X headquarters on a specially built 1.5 kilometer long vacuum tube.
It runs on a track, but it's also in a tube.
The tube is to hold the pressure at a very low pressure, so there's really no air inside there. What happens with the track inside there, nobody really knows. The original idea from Elon Musk was that it had nothing, it was just a tube, so hopefully that will be the final product, so it brings the price right down.
So it's still very much at that prototyping stage where you're working out what technologies will work, what technologies won't, yeah?
Yes, that's definitely right. We know all these technologies will work, but what we're trying to do is decide on which one will be most sustainable, which one will scale the best, and then ultimately which one will be the cheapest.
Because there's already, for example, with magnetic levitation, there are already maglev trains out there in very limited use. Shanghai famously has one that goes out to the airport and has very few people on it. It's fun if you can do it. But it was developed at fairly significant cost.
Yeah, no, that's definitely correct. But one of the things they're trying to test with this one is that's what you call like an active maglev, where you actually have to pump in a lot of electricity to make it levitate. Where with the competition, they're testing passive maglev, which just uses these permanent magnets where you accelerate the pod up to speed, and once it gets some velocity on its side, it will levitate.
Is the objective of this purely to do with commuter transport, shooting people from Sydney to Melbourne or Sydney to Brisbane or wherever else you wanted to go? Australia's quite a big place, as quickly as possible? Or is it also a transport technology for shipping, or is it a bit of both?
So it's definitely both, because one of the companies, Hyperloop One, they've pretty much signed a deal with Dubai to put the first one in by 2020, which will be initially a cargo form of transport. And then they'll, down the line, look at putting people in it, because we want to test with cargo first, because it's not such a big risk.
Cargo's not quite so squishy, basically.
Yeah, I suppose if you squash one tomato, it doesn't really matter too much, but hurting a few people isn't good.
So what kind of speeds are we talking about here?
Ultimately, 1,200 kilometres an hour, so just on the cusp of the speed of sound.
And is that the fastest? What compares to that we have at the moment, apart from an aircraft? Would that be some of the fastest land transportation we have, I would assume?
Well, you just mentioned before, the magnetic levitation, the maglev train over in Shanghai would be the closest, and I think that goes to 430 or something like that.
It's about that, yeah.
It's the fact that you're travelling through this low air pressure tube that lets you go faster.
Yeah, so if you look at those trains, the first thing you'll see has got a very long pointy nose on them, and that's to get rid of the air, it's the resistance from the air. And so if we take that air away, then we don't have that problem.
What's it like being the only team, not just from Australia, the only guys from the Southern Hemisphere to get through? What does that say about technology in Australia?
I'd like to think that it means we're up there with the great, all these great universities overseas, and that we're bringing a lot of cool stuff out. But I'm not real sure. Like, we've had a lot of good products come out of Australia, and hopefully Hyperloop's another one.
Is it one of those things where we could potentially get in on the ground floor on this one?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think with what we're doing, we're placing Australia on that ground floor.
So with the competition aspect of it, is this a kind of winner takes all, somebody's pod design just gets snapped up? Or is it likely, because you mentioned you were working particularly on braking, that your approach to braking might be applied to someone else's approach to a nose cone, might be applied to someone else's approach to a drivetrain kind of deal?
I think you hit the nail on the head there of the latter point. I'm pretty sure it's going to be just pick a component from here, there and everywhere and see which one works the best. They haven't really told us what the outcome of the competition is, so we don't know what the prizes are or what we get out of it, which is a bit of a scary thought.
You said that your braking system, VicHyper's braking system, won an award earlier. How did that sort of stand out?
Because we had a very fault-tolerant system. We had 4 levels of braking in there that would, if there was any problem with one, the next one would be emergency, and so we had magnetic braking, then we had air braking, then a friction brake, and then ultimately the final one was a regenerative braking for all loss of systems that would jump into gear and start powering up systems to stop it. So it was actually quite good. The last sentence in my presentation, I said, this is our fault-tolerant system, and the SpaceX engineer that was judging us, she goes, I'm glad you said that because I'm the fault-tolerant engineer for the rockets, and I looked at those few words, so I was pretty stoked.
Cool. So you're making sure that the tomatoes definitely won't get squished, that they will get there in one piece. Tomatoes being people.
We don't we don't want sauce at the end.
Yes. The team's heading over in January, was it?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. And maybe a bit of FaceTime with Elon Musk.
I hope so. We missed out when we were over there. He only got up on stage, but I don't think he wanted to get in a crowd of 1,000 engineers. It would be a bit too daunting for him, I'd say, because everyone loves him.
He's kind of the rock star of engineering, isn't he?
He is. All the team captains were sitting up the front, and I was one of them. And he came out on stage, so everyone stood up. And I'm like, oh yeah, cool. We'll give him a round of applause, but then we'll sit back down. But everyone stayed standing for like an hour and a half while Elon was talking. I'm like, come on. I know he's great, but we can at least sit down for a little while.
It's a very American thing for people that they see as leaders to do that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, he was great, and he answered a lot of questions, and he's an absolutely amazing person, I think, with what he's done.
So how long have you been working on the design for? How did the team start out, and how long have you been working on the pod design?
So it started out about 18 months ago when the co-founder Matt with me, he gave me a phone call as I was about to leave the farm in New South Wales, and he's like, oh, they've got this awesome competition that I'm going to get involved with, and I didn't think much of it, but he told me it was Hyperloop, and then when I entered into Melbourne 4 hours later, I thought, I'm sick of this drive, I need the Hyperloop. So I got involved, and we started a team, and got to Texas, and now going back to LA.
So how fast, if we'll say we built one between Melbourne and Sydney, how fast would we go? How quickly could it get there?
Hopefully 50 minutes. So definitely cut the travel times a lot. That's CBD to CBD.
So Alex and I could actually record vertical hold in the same room instead of being 1,000 kilometres apart.
Yes, that's very correct.
So every technology has its downside then, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, that's correct. Yeah, you might be visiting people you don't want to visit too much.
All right, Zac, well, that sounds pretty exciting. Good luck in January, and glad to see you're out there, representing Australia. Go Aussies.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
So, Alex, smartphones just don't have an annoying habit of catching on fire. They also have an annoying habit of having dodgy batteries. What are our rights there when your smartphone battery isn't quite all that it should be?
Well, it's an interesting one. And I mean, obviously, the context around this is not only the kind of very obvious Samsung Note 7 issue. And I was rather surprised last week at a launch to discover that apparently there are still people out there holding on to their Note 7s. People, If you're listening to this and you're holding on to a Note 7, send it back. Seriously. You're not just risking yourself, you're risking all sorts of other people, your own possessions. It's just a dumb move. Don't do it. It's not being smart or clever or anything of the sort. It's just dumb. And even legally, you're starting to get into territory where if something did happen, you could be fully liable. So
because you can't say, I didn't know. Yeah.
That public safety warning aside, the other thing that's emerged over the last week is Apple has indicated that if you're an iPhone 6S owner, then for a specified range of handsets, there may have been a dodgy battery issue there. Now, they're at some pains to say it is not a fire or explosion or safety risk issue. It's simply that the handsets randomly switch off, which frankly is going to suck. Not as much as having it catch fire, but it's still a big problem for what is meant to be a premium handset. They've indicated in those cases, if they can identify that your phone is part of the batch that was dodgy, they will replace the battery and the battery only. If there's other damage, that's kind of down to you, for no charge, which is exactly what they should do. Where it gets really interesting, though, is around this issue of what your exact rights with batteries should be for smartphones, and especially considering so many smartphones, and especially premium smartphones, are now sealed battery units. The battery is not a removable, consumable item. It's something that's spot welded in place.
Yeah. So in theory, handsets come with a 1-year warranty, but if you're under a 2-year plan, your telco at least might be a bit more understanding, even if the hardware maker's not. That was my experience. We had an iPhone in my house that the battery went after, it was more than 18 months, and Apple were like, yeah, but then when I spoke to Telstra, they're like, yeah, bring it in and no hassles. I don't know whether it's because I was on a business plan that they were easier to deal with, but they were fine to do it because it was still on contract within 24 months.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one, and some handset manufacturers are better than others, and some of them do a 2-year warranty. And Apple has been slapped around the face by the ACCC on this one on more than one occasion, because there's their warranty, and then there's what Australian consumer law says.
Yeah.
So they can have a warranty that offers all sorts of perks, all sorts of extras. That obviously, in Apple's case, they have their Apple Care thing, which expands it internationally and gives you certain cheaper things, like they lower the cost of a screen repair. And if you drop and smash your screen, no specific warranty is going to cover that. There's a couple of handsets which have as their specific gimmick that they cover that. So Motorola's got one and Huawei have one or two. But generally speaking, you break the screen, you're on your own.
Yeah.
Apple Care drops the cost of that repair quite remarkably, so there can be some value there. But Australian consumer law is both a lot more encompassing and in some ways annoyingly vague when it comes to this, because what it actually talks about is it talks about goods being fit for use for a reasonable amount of time. There's no set definition on what reasonable means. It's generally taken to be what a reasonable person would expect. And there is
that constantly changes with phones, though, because it's not unreasonable to say, well, I'm going to buy a new phone every year when they come out, but then other people, it's not unreasonable to say, well, screw that, I'm going to hang on to it for a while.
Yeah, well, look, the thing here is also there's a weighting against cost, and especially for premium smartphones, there's an expectation, and a reasonable one, that they should actually last a bit longer. You spend a bit more on a product generally under Australian consumer law, you can have a reasonable expectation it will last a bit longer than the cheaper equivalent.
Yeah.
And so even Apple's language around this, and I don't want to seem like I'm picking on Apple, because actually the Android manufacturers are no different in terms of the way the law works. They cannot ignore the consumer law. I'm looking here at Apple's warranty page for general Apple items, and they state, the Apple 1-year limited warranty is for 1 year from date of purchase. But they also have this lovely paragraph, and I'll read it out in full. Without limiting consumers' rights, Apple will provide its own remedies equivalent to those remedies in the consumer guarantee provisions of the Australian consumer law at any time within 24 months of the date of purchase. 24 months is, of course, 2 years, not 1 year. It's confusing, and I think that's a really bad thing, especially when it comes to batteries. Could you get back to this? Batteries are one of those things that over time, they are going to get worse. They are going to degrade. That's simple chemistry. There is nothing that anyone can do in this physical universe about that. So over time, a sealed battery is going to lose charge. But battery failure is a different kind of thing, and the percentage to which a battery drops is also something that can be monitored and in some cases controlled. Sony has a technology built into its phones, for example, where it claims that its batteries will actually last longer. It manages the charging cycle better over the life of the whole device. So in theory, you shouldn't have to replace the batteries. They've only been putting that into their phones this year, so, we'll still have to wait and see how solid that stands, but it's there. As the consumer law states it, however, you've at least got a reason. If you start having a battery fault and you have done nothing else to it, so you haven't dropped it in the toilet, you haven't run over it with your car, you haven't done any other
all of the above
which could damage to it, you've got a reasonable claim for an expensive item like a premium smartphone to go to any hardware provider and say, right, under Australian consumer law, this does not appear to me to be fit for purpose. Now, you may have an argument on your hands. You may have a bit of a fight on your hands. You are not necessarily wrong. You do not necessarily have to take their word of them saying, no, we only do a 1-year warranty on that. Because, a 1-year warranty on a device which is sold on contract for 2 years, which, if memory serves me, I don't believe the ATO will let you even depreciate in less than 2 years. I don't think there's any question at all that the expectation on a mobile phone these days in reasonable condition should be at least 2 years, and probably a bit longer. Well, that just about wraps up another episode of Vertical Hold. Remember, if you've got any comments, hit us up in the comment section on YouTube, via Twitter, or the Facebook Vertical Hold page.
Thanks for listening, and remember, if you like what you hear, hit that subscribe button. Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Alcatel.